Hey there. Following up on other myths about wills and estates. So one of the big myths that I've heard is that if you don't have a will, the property of the person your loved one who's passed on goes back to the state. And that's simply not true. Now, in scenarios where there's not a will, the distribution of any assets is going to follow state law, and that state law is pretty rigid, and it's going to be: one, are there assets to distribute? Two, what debts there are need to be determined. Somebody's going to have to apply to be a dependent administrator, and that dependent administrator is going to have to go through the process of being approved by the court. And if there's no fighting amongst the heirs, that's usually fairly straightforward and simple. But then determining assets, debts, what have you, and then a distribution needs to occur. So that distribution is going to be as state law deems. And then, of course, the other expenditures that are going to come about are going to be determination of heirs. And the court's going to, more likely than not, appoint an investigator of some kind. That often is another lawyer. And those legal fees are going to have to be paid out of whatever assets the loved one who passed away has. So it's a complicated process, but it doesn't mean that the assets go to the state of Texas. And that's just a myth that needs to be dispelled. It's not the easiest process. It's definitely a simpler process with a trust or an estate, a will to be probated. But in the rarest of circumstances, does property go back to the state of Texas. So if that helps diminish any concerns over that, that's what it's intended to do. And the intestate is what it's called when you pass without a will. Intestate proceedings are, yes, they're more complicated and they can be more expensive, but they're not impossible. It's like the guardianship. You don't need to be daunted about that. It's a process. You can get through it. It's not as simple as the will and estate plan process, but it is simply a procedure, and there is a roadmap to get through it and get a result at the other end with the distribution of whatever those assets are. So anyhow, I hope that has been somewhat helpful to deal with that myth about the state getting your assets. Please like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment. I love doing these videos for you, and I'd love to hear back from you. All right, I'm going to talk about other myths in this next video segment coming up.